I'm Clint Culberson with lordsofconsciousness.com, and I am here at the Contact in the Desert here at Joshua Tree, California, with such a cool person that I just met yesterday. Her name is Tricia McCannon. She's an author of several books. You've done DVDs, you've done online books, you have put out a whole lot of material on a whole lot of subjects, ranging from you name it, from all sorts of ancient civilizations to the alternative history that we aren't so much told in our classrooms when we're growing up in school, to such an alternative history also to the religions of the world. And your take on spirituality is quite refreshing and quite just expanding, we will say. How about that? So thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I wanted to read off the 3 book titles that you have, which are so cool. One of them is Dialogues with the Angels. The second one is Jesus, the 30 Lost Years in the Ancient Mystery Religions, and Return of the Divine Sophia, Healing the Earth Through the Lost Teachings of Jesus, Isis, and Mary Magdalene. And people probably hear ISIS and start freaking out. So before, will you just give us the quick rundown on ISIS, the real fast one, so we can get into some of these books that
of course. I imagine most of our listeners know that Isis was the I am principle of the divine feminine, the divine mother. She was the goddess of healing and of wisdom, a great civilization maker in ancient Egypt long ago. We're talking thousands and thousands of years ago. And so after the flood, when there was so much devastation, this would have been about 11,500 years ago, so many people, animals, crops, everything was wiped out. So cannibalism started because the few people that were here were fighting for resources. They were fighting to survive. So she was known, her list of titles goes on for a page, ender of cannibalism, institutor of marriage, maker of the first sale, maker of the laws of spirituality or consciousness, builder of temples, inventor of the first loom, protector of sailors, goddess of healing, goddess of wisdom. And she was actually the daughter of the god of wisdom, Thoth, the ancient god that created the 26-letter alphabet that we have today, that we use in English and all the Romance languages, which before that they had, hieroglyphs. So if you wanted to communicate, you might have to learn 100,000 hieroglyphs, where with our language, 26 letters, we can create millions of words and we can transmit knowledge. And Isis's son was Horus, who in ancient Egypt was considered a god of light, a god of healing, a god of music, and also a savior god, because at the time that they came along, there was a dark force, the Lord Set, who wound up murdering Isis's husband, Osiris, and Isis had to raise her child Horus in secret, and it took a long time for him to grow up, but eventually he challenged his dark uncle Set for control of Egypt and managed to win back Egypt for the light. So that's who Isis is. And of course the use of the term ISIS today is inaccurate for this terrorist group. Its name is actually ISIL or ISIL. It's not ISIS. And so, how come it got turned into ISIS? Well, of course, it's easy to remember first. And the second is because I think that there's a patriarchal element that has been very suppressive of the divine feminine energy for at least 3,000 years. And so in order to sort of contaminate or pollute that name in the subconscious of people who don't know anything about ancient history or Egypt, by calling this terrorist group, it's like the war on Terra. Well, it's T-A-R-A also, the war on Mother Earth, the planet Earth. The war on ISIS. Oh, ISIS is
always blowing my mind, this lady right here.
Well, I know you just asked one simple question. I just kind of went off, but
this is current events. I mean, we're talking about something that is on everyone's mind right now. It's in the world news. All the great leaders are talking about ISIS. And so when we do need to find out where these names come from and why are they being used in such a negative light, and why are they even being changed? Like you said, it's ISIL, so why is it being changed in the Western media?
Exactly. And if you notice, Obama always says ISIL. He says it very properly. But, who owns a lot of the media in the world? It's sort of that Illuminati corporate conglomerates that are patriarchal, and they like their power and they don't want to give it up. So the more they can sort of terrorize people or get people to associate something that always was known to be so beautiful and so positive and so transformative with something scary. It's kind of like the UFO movies. I mean, I love Independence Day, just like everybody else, and there's a new one that's coming out. But, what do we learn subconsciously? We have to fear the aliens. They're here to take over our planet. They're always going to be reptiles. Yes, indeed. That's the way to give those little children nightmares, okay? But that's not actually true. I mean, any species that could come here from hundreds or thousands of light years away certainly has the technology. If they wanted to take over our planet, they would have done so long ago. Amen. So it's actually illogical. But, if they can keep putting this fear into us, and of course we're entertained with these lovely Hollywood bang bang shoot 'em up movies, but it continues to promote this whole idea of fear, hostility. And, we're going to have Bubba out there with his shotgun, because all Bubba knows, if he hasn't actually done his research, and there may be some pretty smart Bubbas out there, but most of them probably don't really know other than what they learned in church or what they've learned, through the media. And if what they've learned is fear, terror, revenge, I got my gun and I'm dying with my boots on and I'm going to kill those aliens and those spaceships, they've got it wrong. And you can't blame them because they're just a product of this conditioning.
Yep. So true.
So then you have to ask, who's doing the conditioning? I mean, the only positive E.T. movie I can really think of was Close Encounters, maybe of the Third Kind, and also that one Steven Spielberg did with the little gray alien. And that's actually the opposite of kind of how it is. I mean, some of the grays are okay, but the only reason they let that one through was because at that time, our government, our secret government, was actually in cahoots with the gray aliens, where we were giving them permission to take cattle, abduct people, and give them land for underground bases in exchange for technology. Well, all that changed really in the 90s, and so you haven't seen any cute little gray alien movies much anymore. But most of the movies, like Signs, I kind of thought M. Night Shyamalan, who has done some great movies, would have risen above the fear factor. But again, he fell into the normal thing. We're being invaded by the reptilians, or the invasion of the body snatchers, or how many different ways can we scare those Earth humans into being afraid of their own shadows, let alone a shadow that doesn't look completely like us.
So that's the paradigm in which we live in. I guess from a media standpoint, what's given to us from other sources, and of course we take it on as programming. But you've kind of spent your life in a much different realm in terms of looking for the light and finding where the light is. You just told the story of ISIS and how it's actually something very beautiful, not something just negative, dark, and destructive. How did tell us how you got your start into this? Have you always had these gifts? Because you've done so much research, but you're much more than just a researcher. You have personal gifts that come from some divine source. I don't know where, but and we all do, by the way. It's not to point you out as someone that's better than anyone else. Just that you're very tapped into your divine gift. And so how did that come to be?
Well, I do believe that all of us are basically beings of light, that we come from the higher worlds, that let us say the heavenly kingdoms, and we're kind of taking these crazy roller coaster vacations down here on planet Earth, where of course we come into a world of great duality, where we're confronted with all sorts of choices every single day, from the simplest ones of are we kind or are we selfish. But as beings of lights, we're kind of wearing these bodies, and of course, sometimes as we get older, they wear out and it's not any fun at all. However, every lifetime is like a chapter in the history of the soul. And really what the soul is doing down here, a large part of the soul that the ancients used to call the angelic twin, which is the core of who we all really are. And this is something I'm going to talk about actually in my new upcoming book called The Landscapes of Heaven, that this part of us remains in the heavenly worlds. And then another part, we send 30%, 40%, 50% of our energy down here to have an experience in the third dimension. And at the end of every lifetime, we wind up meeting that being of light that so many near-death experiencers talk about. And that being who floods us with unconditional love asks us, who did you love and who loved you? Who did you help? Who helped you? And what have you brought me? What meaning has your life had? What difference? What have you learned? What kind of wisdom have you attained? Has your heart opened more? And if you have, then of course your higher self is able to absorb that and bring it into the fullness of who you are, so that it's reflected in lifetime after lifetime. So how did I learn all of this? Your question. From the time I was a child, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up across from a great forest, and unlike a lot of us today that basically live in asphalt and pavement and the skyscraper jungles, I spent a lot of time in the forest and alone. And I guess maybe today we can call it contemplation or meditation. I certainly didn't think of it that way. I simply was tuning in to the magical spring, and there were big standing stones. I used to lay on the almost like standing stone with charn. I used to dream on them, and I used to communicate with the animals and the birds and the deer and the raccoons. And I just looked at us as if we were all connected from the beginning. And because I spent time developing this as a child, I found that I began to see the elementals, who are the guardian spirits of the plant kingdom. And because most humans can't see them or don't pay attention to them, they, I think, were surprised. So they went and told the overlighting angelic being of that forest to come and talk with me. And so when I was 8 years old, he began to teach me about what's called the great chain of being, as spirit comes down through the dimensional planes, becoming more and more and more dense to eventually come into this reality. And this made perfect sense to me. He explained to me how we're all connected and how consciousness is everywhere. And so as I was growing up, I spent a lot of times, I wanted to fly. Maybe I came from a planet where we flew, or maybe I remembered being in the inner worlds where you don't even need wings to fly. And I remember praying to be able to see the purest and the best in everyone. And of course I know that as humans we're imperfect, but as souls we're actually pretty wonderful. And so I think this is one of the reasons why I've been able to do readings for people all around the world, where I'm able to really source them back to who they are at the highest angelic level. But growing up, I was clairaudient, I was clairvoyant, but I didn't have much control over my gifts. I would look at people and be flooded with information, and other times I'd try to see and couldn't see. And so I couldn't figure out how to steer my little ship. Where's the accelerator? Where's the brake pedal? And at night I found myself
like trying to control a fire hose.
Exactly. And when you're young, a lot of us have these gifts, but we either suppress them or they're poo-pooed by our families or our educational system, and so we suppress them. But for me, I didn't. I did anything actually I could to try to develop them and tap into them. I found myself sometimes being able to hear the trees talking to each other. I tried to do telepathy with the cat, and I was really trying to extend my inner senses. And so
did you face a lot of rejection from others because of it? That idea of we all want to fit in. Well, maybe in the world that most of us grew up in, those kind of beyond the five sense world tends to be kind of rejected and shunned. And did you feel that?
I think I learned very early on, growing up in the Deep South, to sort of keep my thoughts to myself. And my dad was a lawyer. He was a county attorney, very brilliant man, but very logical and sort of materialistically based. The five senses are all that's real, and Baptist, maybe God's up in heaven, but it's heaven and hell, and I'll find out when I die. At that level. My mother, I think, was more of a mystical Christian. Later on, she went through a period where she spoke in tongues and did healings just for a few years. And But I think I figured out early on that it was best to keep my observations to myself. And so I really began to develop a strong inner life. And this is actually something that happens for a lot of people who go through troubled childhoods. My dad had a stroke when he was 37, so he had been an athlete, and his whole left side was paralyzed, and so it was very hard for him, and he wound up falling into alcoholism. And unfortunately, his illness took us all down a path of a lot of misery and suffering. Well, some people, to deal with that, I mean, my older sister went through a period of being anorexic, and my younger sister went through a really rough time herself. We all had different coping mechanisms. For me, it was to take long walks at night and rant and rave to the stars about the unfairness of life and suffering. And as I did so, I found this divine companion walking at my side, and he would begin to counsel me about compassion, and he would always ask me questions. Well, why do you think your father drinks? Why do you think your father's suffering? Why do you think your father's in pain? And so he would always bring me back to forgiveness and compassion. And I think it was because of this and my prayers that someone wiser than myself would show up that could help me to understand how these worlds were connected, because I'd find myself one night on board an extraterrestrial ship being taught by very beautiful divine beings. One night I'd be in the bowels of the lower astral plane. The next night I would be in a temple of golden wisdom meeting with masters. It was like, where's the roadmap? And how do I navigate it? I don't know. Somebody has to know.
That's not the experience of every, young child, so I can only imagine.
Well, I actually think many children, especially before the age of 6, they have spirit friends, they remember past lives. I've certainly had students whose little children could see auras, they remember their past lives with their mommies. There was this one little child that used to say, Mommy, don't you remember when I was the mommy and you were the child? Mommy, don't you remember that life when I drowned? Oh, don't cry, Mommy, it doesn't even hurt. It was fine, I'm here now. So, of course, the children were very wise, but usually this is suppressed by the parents. And so by the time we hit about 7 and the cognitive mind kicks in and we're ready for the programming to go to school, we usually stop talking about this stuff. So for me...
That's a good point. The acceptance, the peer acceptance is
exactly. And of course your parents, if anything unusual is happening, your parents are like, don't tell the teachers at school because they don't want their child to be ostracized, of course, So the parents are just trying to protect the child, but what happens is you learn very early on to suppress. So for me, I learned to be quiet about it, but I was still very intent upon these magical relationships because they made sense to me. They made more sense to me than the craziness of the human relationships that were so filled with suffering, and self-created suffering at that. Most of our suffering is self-created. But so for what happened was when I was 19 years old, there was a group of masters called the Viragi masters that appeared to me, and the word Viragi comes from the Sanskrit word virag, which means detachment. So these are sages that have withdrawn from the desire for money, sex, family, obligations in the world. So they become detached from the world, and their focus was learning to chart these inner planes and learning to travel. And so they had that roadmap I was looking for. It's like, thank God. And they also had techniques for that any of us can learn to do, called soul travel, where you could learn to shift your consciousness while still alive in the physical body and travel in these interdimensional realms. And I was like, hot dog, that is the path for me. I don't have to go through my whole life and wait to die to find out what's over there. I can find out now if I'm willing to put in the time and effort to develop those techniques. And so that was sort of the beginning of my first initiation with these great sages of wisdom, many of whom had come from the Far East, the Middle East, but there had been like one great master from Africa, there had been a great master in North America, definitely in Egypt. These masters are not just from one culture, they are throughout history. They're the great, what we think of as the ascended masters today, and most of them are on a 4th or 5th dimensional plane now, but there were 5 when I first began to study that were alive on the planet. One was 5,000 years old, one was 3,000 years old, one was 500, one was 350, and one was about 60 years old. And so I began to work with them. Reb Zartars, Riabal Sakabi, Gopal Das, Fubi Kwans, these are some of their names, Pedar Zask, and they would take me in the inner planes at night and to these temples of great wisdom. And so, there's two ways to learn. One is for a being from the higher worlds to come down to us, and the other is for us to go to them. And so I was working to raise my frequency so I could go to them. And sometimes, of course, they came to me. So, and then...
Is it accessible to all?
Yes.
And if so, I have a lot of friends who have access to that in a much easier way than others, including myself. But for those who are open to it and who are wanting to have these experiences, not necessarily coming from like plant medicines, but just on their own through maybe meditation or whatever way we do it. What's the first steps? I mean, how do we set our intentions to that, and then what are the actions we can take to have these experiences, or are they just for No, they are for everybody, but let me say that some of us have grown up in environments that were very, very dense. And so first off, we have to try to drop a lot of that density, which means victim consciousness. It means actively participating in things like revenge, violence, stabbing people in the back, because those are lower frequencies. And everything we do contributes to our frequency. Listening, let us say, to higher consciousness music, as we can tell now from these experiments of Isuro Emoto with water, the water and the plants respond to higher consciousness music, and they really do not respond well to heavy metal or to things that are violent or sharp in energy, just like we don't like sharp objects sticking us. It's the same for them. So we have to kind of make an effort, and a lot of these things will change gradually as you raise your frequency. There's some people that become vegetarians. I'd love to be a vegetarian, but I still eat chicken and fish because my body type needs that kind of grounding. So there may be a time when that falls away for me, but sometimes you can't push the river. So you just have to go incrementally and have patience with yourself. I love. Thank you. Please listen to what you just said, because it's so vital. So many of us try to take a big bite, take the whole thing at once,
and then we beat ourselves up when we fail. And so
that's like the shame and guilt we felt in organized religion. It's almost the same thing then.
That's exactly right. I will say what the masters teach at the core of their teachings is that there are three underpinning principles behind all creation. The first is love. The universe is made of love and the animantine particles of love. And so love exists inside of us, whether we've accessed it or not. Love is what created us. Love is what brings us home. This is why the opening of the heart was always emphasized in great religions like Jesus's message. The second is that from that issued a sound. In the Bible, it's called the Word. In the beginning was the Word in the Gospel of John, but it's also been called the sound current, the Bani, the Vani, the Shabda, the Ekshar. There are different names for it in different spiritual teachings. And it's part of the esoteric teachings, for example, of the Essenes. They talk about the great sound current. The Brahmins talk about it. The Druids talked about it. And it was in the Egyptian schools, of course, knew. And from these packets of sound energy, the Om sound or the Hu sound, one is the female, the Om sound, the male is the Hu. They're both totally beautiful sounds that underlie a creational reality. So the scientists now call these photons, packets of sound energy. And the photons turn into phonons, or packets of light energy. So from the sound comes the light, and from the light comes the matter. So this is how, from love, sound, light, these are the first three principles of creation. So in asking how we begin to access this, there's some simple things you can do in terms of meditating, but they teach processes to focus on the light, seeing the light of God through the opening of the third eye, and the sound of God, the audible life stream. Now, many of us have heard this. Let's say when you're about to fall asleep, you start hearing the roaring of this kind of ocean. Sometimes you hear high-pitched frequencies. All this is the sound current. But on this plane, it sounds kind of like the roaring of an ocean. When you start moving up, like there's one dimension, it sounds like the buzzing of bees. And I remember years ago thinking, the buzzing of bees, oh please, it can't sound like that. One day I'm meditating, I suddenly start hearing bzzz. I'm like, I open my eyes, are there any bees in here? Then after all, bzzz. Like, where are the bees? And I'm sure they were just trying to prove to me, like a joke, like I was making fun of it. Okay, yes, it's absolutely right. The causal plane, the buzzing of bees. Once you get up to the higher levels, it starts sounding like harps and flutes, which is why there's all those pictures about angels playing harps and flutes. When people go to the other side in near-death experiences, they hear chimes, like rainbow chimes. When angels appear, a lot of times you'll hear chimes, you'll hear sounds, because light and sound and frequency are very connected with one another. Even though we only see in a small range and hear in a small range, as you move up, you get more access.
Right.
So you can chant, for example, for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you're comfortable with, and then it begins to open your inner hearing. You could just chant like, and after you do that for about 5 minutes, you can start hearing that current in everything. Everything, in the whistling of the wind and the moving of the traffic patterns and a train passing by. You can hear it behind it all. And it becomes like a wave, and you can ride this wave like a surfer up into the higher realms. And these waves, actually, they move in spirals. And when people travel into the celestial realms, the heavenly realms, they start describing all these vibrational paths that the soul moves along in spirals and circles, and they say the paths hum. So sound and light become interchangeable, and it becomes a transport system for the soul to begin to travel. Now with light, when you start working with the light, in the beginning, when you're trying to open up your third eye, you'll see it like it's a flash in your peripheral vision. It's harder to hold it in the center of the forehead. But as time progresses, you'll be able to hold a blank light screen in the middle of the forehead, and then you can observe anything that comes in on the screen. But myself personally, I think it's very important to call in the higher forces of light when you do meditate. You want to deliberately connect your heart with your third eye, with your crown, and then you just like send up a beacon of light into the higher realms, and you can connect with the sun or the Christ energy or the great central sun, or however you want to conceive of that light of lights, and call that column down around you. And you can actually call it like two columns, like two cylinders that are sitting inside of each other, and then you just spin them. And once you spin them, you ground it down to the earth, into the center of the earth, 360 degrees, all dimensional levels. Once you set them in motion and spin them, you let them go, and you don't think about them anymore. You're in the column. This is actually a quick way to activate your Merkaba field, which is an energetic field that contains the male and the female energies within it. And it's a transport system that souls use and angelics use in the higher worlds, is this Merkaba field.
Our planet has one too, correct?
Yes, every living thing has one.
Got it.
Every one of the subtle energy bodies, the astral, the causal, the mental, the Buddhic or spiritual etheric, and the soul bodies, every one of them has a different energetic configuration. Right. So that configuration is actually, the six-pointed star is actually the six-dimensional body. So wow. And that allows you to begin to travel in your soul body instead of astral travel, which is more limited. Astral travel, you have to stay connected to the silver cord, which is connected to your navel or your Tandien, and you're only able to travel in the physical world on the astral plane with your astral body. So it's kind of like astral body's above this one, so you can travel on that plane and anything below, but you can't get up into the even higher worlds in your astral body. So better to learn to travel in your soul body, where you can go anywhere you want to. That's a kind of an unlimited energetic body, and the access point for that is right here. So nothing wrong with developing a strong third chakra, like with Qigong or Tai Chi. Those are wonderful, wonderful practices for grounding yourself and balancing yourself in the world. But once you begin to do soul travel, you're really going to be working from the 6th and 7th chakras.
Wow. Thank you for that. Honestly, I'm going to replay this like over and over just so I can use this as part of my practice. We're short on time, and there's like 1,000 questions I want to ask you. One of them I really would love. We probably have to do a whole new interview. I'd love to talk to you about your book about Jesus and where the heck that guy was from, a young boy till when he came back, and all of a sudden he started his ministry at age 31. But I want to ask you another question. But go ahead.
Why don't we do that in another interview?
Yes.
If you'd like to, we can end this one in a few minutes, and then we'll just do another one very quick.
I like this idea. Yes.
Okay, cool.
New content creator, Tricia McCannon of lordsofconsciousness.com. Okay, let me ask you this. This is the question that I'm dying to hear you answer. We are living in very fascinating times, okay? Some find it to be quite perilous, and some find it to be quite beautiful, and maybe this is the calm before the storm, or the storm before the calm, or whatever. I'm not sure. What would you tell someone who is wondering what's happening on this planet? It seems like the systems that we have in place right now are starting to come to a grinding halt in terms of like their sustainability on this planet. I mean, our Mother Gaia is not going to. It seems like she's going to start rejecting some of the practices that we've been using, and we're already seeing it. I mean, bees are dying. Speaking of bees, they're dying off at alarming rates, and that's her telling us something. And so, can you kind of just speak to? We'll end this interview by you just speaking to the time period in which we live in. And I know you could go on again for 2 hours on this topic alone, I'm sure, and where we're coming into. But the 101 of what this is.
Okay, so what I would say is this: there's a galactic equator. That's the galaxy, and if you looked at it from the side, it's like any equator. When our solar system moves around the center of the galaxy, which takes about 240 million years, something like that, we don't just go around like a flat record player, we go up and down like a sine wave. And so one entire, let us say, cycle where we go up and come down, go below the equator, and then come back up to the equator is a period of about 25,920 years. That was known as the Great Year to the ancients.
And that's all scientifically proven stuff. I mean, NASA scientists would be telling us the same thing.
Exactly. This is ancient knowledge that's based in astronomy. And of course, during the course of that time, during the spring equinox, which we consider to be around March 22nd, we slowly move through having a different alignment with a different astrological sign. And we basically move 1 degree every 72 years. So if you do the math on that, if there are 12 signs in a circle, 360 degrees, that means there are 30 degrees in every sign. So 72 years for each degree times 30 years, 30 degrees is 2,160 years. So every one of these astrological ages are about 2,160 years, although in truth, some of them are fatter constellations, like Pisces is fat, Aries was narrow. So one might really be 28 degrees and another might really be 31 degrees, but that's a rough estimate, 2,160. If you add 12 of those together, that's how you get the Great Year. But what happens in the movement is as we drop below the celestial or the equatorial galactic equator, we kind of fall into a period of decline, a period of asleepness. And this is what happened when Atlantis fell about 11,500 years ago. The water tables all over the planet rose some 400 feet. Land masses went down, and we kind of have the current geography that we have today. And a lot of destruction happened after the Great Flood.
And this is, by the way, some of the work that a guy named Randall Carlson, who's doing incredible stuff to explaining, scientifically proving that something happened. How many years ago was it, did you say?
11,500 years ago.
He says somewhere in the 12,000 year mark. Graham Hancock saying the same thing. So this is all,
Randall Carlson lives in Atlanta where I live, and I know him. He's a Mason. So cool. He's an excellent researcher, and he's a real student of the geology of this planet. Right. So he grounds everything in science. So what occurred after that is those who survived attempted to gather the remnants of the lost knowledge, and this is how the mystery schools got formed. And they realized also that knowledge could be dangerous in the hands of people who are selfish or greedy. For example, in the mystery schools, of the 5 Platonic solids, which is the circle, the sphere, the cube, the icosahedron, the dodecahedron, and the triangle, the dodecahedron is the most sophisticated of those. And it is the necessary component for atomic energy or nuclear weapons. So this was kept from all the initiates until the 3rd level of initiation, because if you really knew how to apply this, and they did in Atlantis, and create the wrong kind of science, you have the situation we have today, which is we have so many nuclear missiles we could blow up the whole planet and every living thing on it, which is crazy making. So they understood that knowledge in the wrong hands could be disastrous for everyone. And this is why the knowledge was, they had to discover if you were a moral person, if you were a person that just served yourself, or you were on board to try to help humanity. And if you were the latter, then you moved up the scale, where they taught you, where they were working with your left brain and your right brain. And the male brain, the left brain, is very much science, math, astronomy, sacred geometry, architecture. The left brain's more healing, imagination, creative sciences, and our ability to travel. And it's really the union travel in the inner worlds. It's the union of the male and female, the left and right hemispheres, that allows us to open our inner senses and to gain access into these inner realms. And they understood that. So they toggled you back and forth between everything we learn at the university today that has intrinsic knowledge, and then initiatory experiences where they taught you to learn to leave your body. And they gave you opportunities to learn this and then come back and see what you had discovered. So it wasn't just academic knowledge like our universities are today, it was also experiential knowledge. So when you ask about what I think about this, we're at a place now where we've gone down to the trash can. The trash can was definitely
the bottom of the loop, right?
The bottom of the loop, and we've come up. And actually, the worst part, aside from maybe the couple of thousand years after the flood, which was pretty bad, there was actually a lot of knowledge in ancient Greece and Persia and Sumeria and Babylon, and certainly in Egypt, and the Druids all through Europe and so forth. And that was all preserved, and there was a lot of good. But I think, to me, the trash can was the Dark Ages. It was the time when Jesus' beautiful, incredible message, and I'm a great lover of Jesus, got perverted really by selfish interest within the Roman Empire that then became the Roman Catholic Church. And they went after, they said, this is the doctrine, take it or leave it. We're going to cut out the things we don't agree with. We'll squash anything but the patriarchy. So women had no power. Mary Magdalene, poor thing, got demoted to be a prostitute, which she certainly wasn't. That was 588 AD. That was Pope Gregory said this in one of his homily 33. He said, clearly that expensive unguent that she must have gotten from forbidden acts of carnal perfuming her flesh, which, if anybody knew anything about the ancient mysteries, they would understand that the anointing of the feet of Jesus and the head of Jesus was a rite performed by the queen, his mate, or the high priestess, to the sacrificial priest king who knew he was going to die for the good of the people. This was an ancient rite that had been going on for thousands of years, and they would understand why Jesus said, this account of her shall be in every one of these Gospels. We will remember her because it marked her as the priestess of Isis and his mate and his partner, and it marked him as the Horus king that was the divine solar lord that had returned to give his life, so that hopefully people like us could learn through his example that the spirit can transcend the body, that it's greater than the body. So this dark age, for up until about the mid 1200s, the Catholic Church even said that witchcraft didn't exist, and so anybody disagreed, from the Kabbalist onward to other Christian groups. I mean, there are 23 sects of Christianity were labeled as heretics and murdered and killed. And then after, like from the 1200s on, we had the murdering of the Waldensians, the Cathars, the Knights Templars in the early 1300s. And after that, those campaigns were so successful, the church said, okay, we're just going to call everybody after this in the 1300s witches, and then we'll go after all the women. And of course, the reason that they did that was because they had disenfranchised the women. In the beginning, Catholic priests could marry and have families. But then what happened is when they died, they left their house to their children and their wife. Well, that didn't work for the church, who wanted to amass a lot of money and power, so they made it so they wouldn't marry, so there was no one to leave anything to except the church. So what that also meant, since they meant that women were not allowed to own property in this patriarchal system, is if they killed the husband off in war, which they did, and killed the sons off in war, and the mother or the grandmothers were left alone, they had no right to their own houses they had lived in for years. They were turned out and sent to the woods, where they gathered sticks and tried to stay warm, and they were called witches or crones, okay, which originally meant wise one, by the way. And there was so many of them that the church well, we lost our heads.
Technical difficulties here as I kick the camera off of the stand.
Are we balanced there?
We're good. We're good.
Battery's about to down.
It's okay. Keep it going. Sorry about that.
The world of media. So this is how strong the murdering of the witches was. It knocked us off our rockers. That's exactly what happened.
She's a witch.
Yeah. No. So, what happened, though, was they felt so guilty. It was like the shadow. It's kind of like the Native Americans. Who is the one group that's not wanted to hear the Native Americans at the United Nations? America. Yeah. Not because the current modern people in America don't like the Indians, but because it's our shadow. We were the Europeans that came over and killed everybody over here that we possibly could, took their land. So of course we don't want to hear from them, because they remind us of our past transgressions. So it's the same thing. You have all these old women starving to death in the forest, eking out a living. It's like, well, we'll just get rid of them. We'll call them witches. That's what we'll do, and then we'll just kill them. Most of them were just housewives or grandmothers that had no place to go, and I'm sure some were healers or herbalists that tried their best to eke out a little bitty living by learning about the plants. So anyway, so when you ask me where we're going to go, we, from the time of the Renaissance on, and we begin to enter into about a 1500-year phase where we are beginning to move back into alignment with the Galactic Center. So we are, at least more than a third of the way. Some think it only takes us 1,000 years to pass through that Galactic Center, but I think it might be more like 1,200 or 1,500. So we are in the process now of moving up, and as they say, it's darkest before the dawn. So this is why the darkest age took place before this began and then the Renaissance began. Right. So part of what I think is happening now for so many people who are going through so many difficulties is they are being tried and tested, because it's the completion of that huge great year, which means whatever our karma is we've accumulated, unfinished relationships, unfinished things, maybe you were a thief in one lifetime and, you've atoned since then, but you hadn't quite finished your karma. Or maybe you were a ruthless tyrant about 10 lifetimes ago and you've learned a lot, but you still have a ways to go. We're getting an opportunity to have all those karmic experiences in our faces and to make choices at a daily level towards, as I said, kindness or cruelty. Selfishness or sharing, and those little choices matter. It's not just the big things. All the little things add up to the big things, and it's through the choices, the wiser choices in the little things, that I think we can transcend and become aware of this light being that lives inside of us, our higher angelic self, our oversoul self, if you will. And this will allow us to graduate from Earth School, if we wish to, at the end of this great year.
It's exciting. It's super exciting. I mean, it's always good to know that you're coming into the light, as opposed to, well, I guess we're headed into the dark. So we can only imagine what it must have been like on the other side of it. And it seems like you tell me, is it not an evolution that we go through many times over? I mean, even after thousands of years of light, will we not enter a time of darkness again as we go through these solar
Changes.
cycles, or not solar cycles, but galactic cycles?
Yes, it is. But let me just say that what happens is when we go into the lower phase, many times what happens is the divine masculine in its highest, most beautiful, radiant form comes in as the male Christ, and the female Christ comes, but a lot of times she's not acknowledged. But he comes in to do what men often do best, which is to protect us, to lead us, to enlighten us, to illuminate us with an example of light in action, wisdom in action. So this is what happened in the downward cycle. What do we do? Of course, we murdered Jesus, and not just him. There have been other great avatars that have come to this planet that we've also, done away with because it didn't work with the power elite. So as we come up through this other side, what happens then during this up cycle is the female Christ comes in. Now the male Christ is also going to return, but the divine feminine must return to the planet to heal us. And of course we're on this upward swing. So it is extremely exciting time to be alive. And I think that for me, I am a clairvoyant, and I've read for over 6,000 people around the world. And a lot of the people who come to me are basically the healers, the priests, the priestesses, the wise people from the past who had the courage to continue to come into this planet for the last several thousand years. And sort of when the doo-doo hit the fan, they had a rough time of it these last 1,000 years. And many of them are really ready to do their work on the planet and step forward, but they have to clear those last traumas, those last fears of being true to themselves, speaking their truth, and allowing themselves to honor the wisdom and knowledge that lives within them.
Absolutely. I can just personally attest that this has been my experience in my own life, and I think many people here at this convention we're at this weekend and all throughout the world are experiencing, just in their own lives, it's similar story to this big story that you're talking about, the story of the collective of humanity, and just of above and beyond that, of this planet and every living thing within it. And it's something that's so vital to get tapped into, connected to, and returning to our roots. Like full circle on this entire interview, your whole spirituality was derived from your time spent in nature, your time connected to the plant teachers, and just our planet teacher, which is our mother. And I can't say how vital that's been for my own life in terms of letting go some of that trauma into nature. It's almost as if nature's here to also absorb some of these traumas for us if we allow it.
I totally agree. That connection with nature, they say that the heartbeat of the mother is, I think, 7.8 on the Schumann resonance cycle. And of course, there are people who believe that as we go into this ascension process, that the speed of that heartbeat is speeding up. There are groups like the Heart Math Institute that's taken a look at that and so forth. And it could well be that happens, but this is one of the reasons why a lot of the holy men and women would go into caves. This is why the Native Americans create kivas or sweat lodges in order to go in to get closer to the earth and the resonance of the earth. And there was a great research project done many years ago where they interviewed healers from all around the world. I mean, Russian healers, Polish healers, Brazilian healers, American, Canadian, African healers, and they found that all the healers, guess what? Their brainwaves resonated. They fell into that 7.8 megahertz resonance along with the earth. So by aligning ourselves with the Mother Earth and the heart energy, what happens is we come into alignment with our higher self, and we're able to transmit those healing energies to others.
So beautiful. And you had talked about others, how vital and how important it is in this time period to see beyond ourselves, to see our greater family, those around us, that we are all connected, we are all one, we are brothers and sisters. I mean, what all the religions have been telling us on some level, at least. I mean, most people's faith kind of has that in it. yet so often it's not applied in actual the real world we live in. But how absolutely necessary is it in this time period that we're living in?
I think it's really critical. The ancients called it the law of one, or the law of, you could also call it the law of return. That what we do comes back to us. We can call it the law of karma for that matter. But really, what is the law of karma? It's to teach us what it is to walk in someone else's shoes. If we are the victimizer, we get to have some lives as the victim, to discover how it feels to be the victim so we don't do it again. We don't want to be the victimizer. We don't want to be the victim. And so remembering that really all of the great mystic teachings in all religions and all ages have said that there is one great intelligence behind it all, and that one intelligence basically divides itself into a divine feminine and a divine masculine, a divine mother and father, and then the divine daughters and sons, and then the angelic orders, and it comes down. And so if we think about it like this, we realize that we're like tiny fragments of this supreme being. Jesus even said, "Ye are gods," and of course the Jews threw stones at him for saying that. Those said, "Ye mortals are gods, going about in the bodies of mortals," recognizing that the same eternal soul that lives within beings that might live for 1,000,000 years lives inside of us, even if these bodies only last 100 years. So recognizing that we all have this immortal spark means that we stop doing actions of cruelty. We stop torturing our animals for chemical experiments. We stop butchering animals. I mean, if we're going to kill animals to eat them, let them have wonderful lives. Let them, be joyful and happy, and let's not traumatize them if we have to eat them. So, we need to just think of, would you want to be treated that way? If you would not want to be treated that way, then you don't want to treat another being, four-footed, winged, or swimmer, crawler, flyer, or two-legged that way.
That is so true. We pretty much are going to do an hour-long interview here, okay?
Yeah.
But so we have 10 minutes,
Okay.
and I wanted to just ask you, since we're going to just do this as a continuation, heck, we even dropped the camera, alternative media, baby. This is what it's like.
These guys are great, and I love the name of your show, Lords of Consciousness.
Yeah.
I said Lords and Ladies of Consciousness. That's right.
We try to transcend gender,
That's
the
right.
Lordanas, as we call them, right?
But I love it. I mean, it's a great name, Lords of Consciousness, and really, that's what all of us are being called to be right now.
Yeah.
Lords of our own kingdom. And
Amen.
What is our kingdom? It's our emotional, our mental, our physical, and our spiritual self. And the only one that can decide how you rule your kingdom is you. And in that way, you become the Lord of Consciousness.
Oh my gosh, she was in commercials for much of her career. Old career.
No, I was a
She's
commercial advertising photographer,
Yes.
but
Well, I know, but you got it in you. You just you just sold our entire website right there. It's amazing.
well, it's true. Really, we are all being called to become the Lords of Consciousness for ourselves, and to claim sovereignty. And this is one of the things that I think in different ages, and we've been in the age of Pisces for 2,000 years, the message Jesus came to give us was the kingdom of heaven is within. Forgiveness is the key. Do unto others as you'd like to be done to. And love is the answer. Those are kind of his four major messages, although he had a lot of other things to say. But the two fishes are very dualistic. If you remember how they swim in two directions. So we could have gone his way, which was, he was the avatar for our age, or we could have gone the way that unfortunately we wound up going, which was the victim consciousness of all the Inquisition and the things I just described. So, the reason that happened was because the age of Aries is a masculine age. It's the most warlike age. It came in around 2150 BC. And so from that time to Jesus' time, there was 2,000 years of war, and more war. I mean, you got the Sumerians and the Persians and the Babylonians and the Hebrews and the Egyptians, and everybody was fighting everybody else. They were just losing their mind with that war god stuff. So what you had was this very male-dominated, tyrannical Roman Empire, which had some good qualities to it, but it was very materialistic, coming in on this softer feminine age of Pisces. And the way the ages are stacked, one is meant to be masculine dominant and feminine subdominant. The next one's meant to be feminine dominant, masculine subdominant, and then there's an age of balance between. So Pisces was meant to be a feminine age, but Aries was too dominant and too strong, so unfortunately we lost a lot of the core of Jesus's. I mean, we have some of the core of his message, but a lot of it was lost. Now we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is one of the balanced ones where the male and female come together as partners. Thank goodness.
Is this the dawning of the age of Aquarius?
Yeah, actually, that's a great
difficulty from Alternative Media's greatest website of all time, lordsofconsciousness.com. You were talking again about the age, we were coming
age
out
of
of the age of, we're coming into the age of Aquarius.
We are, in fact, and some of the great theosophists from the 1930s, like Manly P. Hall and Rudolf Steiner, Annie Besant, they talk about how we enter the age of Aquarius the first year of 0 degrees in 1939. So if you add 72 years to 1939, I think we come to 2011. So 2012, if their reckoning is correct, would have been the first year of the first degree of 1 degree of Aquarius. Okay, which is part of what.
And the Mayans knew this.
Well, the Mayans know a lot.
Yeah.
They do. And their system is very complicated, as we know, with the time cycles. But they've been very, very accurate to an astonishing level. But the age of Aquarius is ruled, actually, all these ages are ruled by air, earth, fire, or water. But the age of Aquarius is ruled by ether. And so it's not only an air age where you have things like the telegraph, the internet, the cell phones, lots of communication, the airplane, all these things we've seen from the 20th century. But we also have this quality of ether that brings in the space beings. And these are our space brothers, and the intergalactic connection, where once again, after 25,920 years, we have an opportunity to become part of a galactic alliance of benevolent space beings who are as interested in us claiming sovereignty and goodness in our civilization on this planet as people like you and I and our listeners are. And they're not interested in world conquering or taking over. They've got their own planets. They've got their own places to run. They're not trying to do, interplanetary expansion and acquisition as our leaders might do. They're interested in us waking up to that unity consciousness you were talking about and taking a seat at the galactic table. And this is why we have these little buttons that say Galactic.
Richie, can you zoom in on this? This is way cool.
Galactic Federation Ambassadors. And that's what I think that we are. It's not about, oh my gosh, there are aliens out there and they might abduct me, which is just more of that fear element. It's really about coming into a consciousness that how we act makes a difference, and that we are ambassadors. And if we want a seat at the galactic table, it's time for us to kind of grow up and begin to act like all life matters.
Yeah. It is, we're here at a extraterrestrial convention in many ways, it's much more than that, but we're here to discuss the evidences that have been shown to us by countless accounts by so many people across the world, and to just continue to brush it under the carpet and brush it under the rug, and to just deny these experiences, and even above and beyond just five senses experiences, the kinds of experiences that so many are having on the internal realms with what's out there, and that this is a multi-dimensional reality.
It is.
And that is hard to believe. It is. I know. Trust me, I have come from a very five-sense world myself, and I've just recently started finding this. And when I find people like you who've been at it for so long, and the things that you're finding, the entities that you're coming into contact with, they can't be denied any longer. We need to start accepting these realities that people are having. And even again, Terence McKenna always says that the most important evidence of truth is personal experience, right? So even if I haven't necessarily, communed with Thoth, and others actually said they have, and does that mean that is not true just because I haven't experienced it? No, but I think when we keep an open mind, we might be able to have those personal experiences, which then will then...
It's all vibration. And I want to just remind our listeners, all of us travel every single night in our dreams.
Yeah.
The question is, where do you travel to? If you've spent the last 2 or 3 hours watching bang bang shoot 'em up movies, horror movies, conflict movies, which the Illuminati is very good with their media, putting out some of the most horrible conflict-ridden things between about the hours of 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning. So what it does is it pollutes our dream state. So instead of dreaming into these higher levels, our vibration is low because we've just taken on this big shot of dualistic conflict, struggle, violence, and consequently it keeps us in our dream state, traveling in the kind of the bowels or the middle level of the astral. So we never get to go up into these higher levels. So when we talk about the multidimensionality of all of us, each one of us has a shot every single night to meditate, call in those masters, do some spiritual reading for 10 minutes, 30 minutes before you go to sleep. Shift your consciousness, and by doing that, use your dream state time as an opportunity to travel in the inner realms. Start keeping a dream journal. Teach yourself to go from your busy beta as you drop into alpha and theta where we dream, and by keeping a dream journal, you're going to build your muscle in the alpha state of consciousness. In that state of consciousness, then you can begin to retain your experiences in the other realms and bring them back and use them consciously in this world.
Tricia, thank you on behalf of even those who are watching, because I'm sure there are going to be people who watch this who this will have a drastic effect on their lives. And so I really thank you. I want to honor you for giving your time, giving yourself, giving your energy, your spirit, who you are. Where can people find you? Where can people find to get, where can they get your books?
Sure.
Where can they get the material you've put out there?
They can just go to my website, which is my name, TriciaMcCannon.com or TriciaMcCannonSpeaks.com. Both addresses will take you to the same place. And it's just like it sounds, TRICIA, Tricia McCannon, McCannon, Cannon, TriciaMcCannon.com. And, you'll be able to see I have an amazing online mystery school, about 13 classes. I have about 30 DVDs, 10 CDs, and my 3 books in print, and just finished my 4th book, The Landscapes of Heaven, which will be out in 2017. So there's plenty for you to look at with audio broadcast, YouTube videos. There's a lot of free stuff on the website, as well as things you can order really reasonably. And if you want one of these Galactic pens, I probably still have a few left over. They're not on the website, but you can call me up. My phone number's on the website. I'm home all summer long in 2016. I think the next time I really travel is I'm doing a workshop on the Egyptian mysteries in the Omega Institute in Upper State New York in September, the weekend of 9/11 of all things. And I think I'm going to be doing a Star Visions conference in November sometime in Florida. So I'm around, and anytime you call and I'm out of town, I have a message telling you where I am and when I'll be back. So then you can just call me when I'm back, and I'm happy to speak to any and all of my crazy brothers and sisters out there who are on the path of awakening to their true divinity.
I love it.
Thank you.
You're one of your biggest messages is the reining in of the divine feminine again, and that happens by those who are modeling it and those who can model it to others. And you do that in such an incredible way, so thank you. This is my new friend, by the way.
Thank you. I love these guys. They're wonderful. And Curtis behind us Richie behind us is with us as well in spirit and in form.
Yes. Go ahead, Richie. Turn the camera and we'll end this.